So you're stuck in the conference room with the operating committee again, banging your head against the wall, trying to set specifications and options for a community that'll be grand opening in 6 months. Sales is complaining that the base carpet is too high and there aren't enough cabinet choices. No exceptions this time though. You've got to get this subdivision open using the NSC specs, support it with signature standards, and you got to make it work. The construction VP comes in with increased cost of materials, which of course pushes the house cost budget even further away from the feasibility budget. The market analyst says that the competition is using substantial incentives to move their existing inventory, so we can't blow our opening pricing. So what spec level do you use? What do you make standard? What do you leave out of the house? Can you use any consumer paid upgrades at all? And man, as the average sales price of the community heads north, certain options and upgrades are becoming much more controversial. So what's a content load anyway, and who cares about it? Well, let's talk about a little definition. What a content load is, or what the content load is for a community and the homes in that community, are all of the things that we include in the asking price of the house, those things that, that get us to the advertisable price of the house. So when you think about it, the content load of the house includes the original cost of the land, the cost of the lots, any amenities that would be in the community, all of those kind of things. What's outside of the content load, but what can be shifted around, are things like consumer paid upgrades. Lot premiums would be a really good example of that. Right here, this really nice handrail, hardwood top and spindles, this would be a great example of one of the things that our competitors and what we used to formerly ask the consumers to pay extra for. So what simplification is trying to do here is trying to match, trying to get the content of the house right for the buyer of the house. And that's a messy and inexact science. There's no perfectly right answer to it, but what we want to do today is provide some tools for you to help strike that delicate balance between what the requirements and the expectations are of the consumer, what the competitive realities are, what you've got to go up against to beat the competitors that are also trying like crazy to get the last dollar from the next consumer, and finally the business realities. How do we put this whole package together in such a way that we still make the appropriate margin and we get the right velocity or the right sales pace in our communities? So let's talk about a process for putting a little science to figuring out what content goes in our homes and our communities. I got a 4-step process in mind for you, and let's start with step 1. For me, most of you know me, it starts with the consumer. It always starts with the consumer. So step 1 in the process is going back and reconsidering who the target consumer is for this community. Now, a lot of times when we do the feasibility study, the study that decides where we're going to be, who the target consumer is going to be, what products are going to be in our communities, sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 years can go by between the time we do that study and the time we actually do a grand opening. And man, a lot of stuff can happen in that intervening period. We can have delays, we can get hit with more impact fees, we can have problems with the development of the land, we can run into things. A lot of things can affect the cost of the community, or maybe even the area changed or something like that. So re-examining the target consumer group, what kinds of things would you look for? What kinds of things would you think about? Well, have we tried to fix some cost blows or some budget blows by passing the additional costs on to the consumer that maybe they can afford or maybe they can't? Have we tried to change target consumer groups? Sometimes that's a possibility, but more often than not, it's a very great risk. Let me take you through a little quick example of this, and this is a tough one because we wrestle with this a lot. Let's just say that a community was originally targeted for TCG 5, our good, solid, middle-class families for whom schools are really important. And prices had gone up, costs had gone up, all sorts of things had happened, so the ops committee decided, let's do TCG 6. Now you've got to examine, is the location strong enough for a 6, or are we really doing a 5 and just pricing it up too much? Those are some of the kinds of things you can look at. How do we start with it? Well, let's talk about the location itself. If you find yourself talking about, and your strategic marketing folks are telling you that this location is all about value, good house, a lot of house for the money, a great place to be for a value standpoint, that typically is TCG 5 stuff, not TCG 6 stuff. If you're talking about prestige, where's the Trader Joe's, where's the Macy's, the great shopping, the great restaurants, more like a TCG 6 stuff. So can the location support a change in TCG? That's the thing you got to ask yourself. What we need to do is make sure that we've got the right match of location and consumer. Critical piece of information. So step 2 of the process is to execute a strategic competitive shop. Now that sounds like a big mouthful, but it really is quite simple. In the first step of the process, we tried to figure out who they are, and we committed to a specific targeted group of consumers. We committed to their requirements, we committed to their needs. So in the second step, we need to get out into the field, we need to get out into the competition, and we need to figure out what that consumer can get for their money right now. What the other builders are offering, what they're charging for it. You can see what's working, you can see what's not working. But it's strategic in the sense that this time we're looking very specifically from the vantage point of the buyer, from their budget. So it starts with a complete description of the buyer again, thinking about who they are, putting ourselves in the mindset of that buyer, giving ourselves that buyer's budget, and then going out to shop. And shop strategically in the sense that we're looking for what that buyer can get for their money. It's important because those kinds of things establish the expectations that the buyers will have as they come into our community. Now the fun part of this strategic competitive shop is getting out in the field and seeing all those nice model homes and looking at all the stuff. But the tough part is setting up the analysis. And the idea with the analysis is taking all the things that are offered to the consumers out there and grouping them strategically so we can really think about them. What we're talking about are basic items, performance items, and excitement items. So let's talk about those. First of all, what's a basic item? A basic item is an absolute must-have, deal killer, I won't buy this place if this isn't in there kind of a thing. Now, some big examples are like a 4-bedroom home for a family, that kind of stuff. Now, normally by the time we're talking about features and options, we've already established what product line is going to be in there, so you guys may not be able to change the number of bedrooms in a house, but take that same thought and apply it to the features in the house. What kind of appliances have to be in the house? Bottom line, base case. What kind of flooring options have to be in the house? And flooring availability has to be in the house. Absolute bottom line, base case. That's the first group of things that you need to identify. Basics. The second one is the performance items. Now usually these are the kind of things that kind of like more is better kind of stuff. Again, thinking about the overall house, more square footage usually for most buyers is better. Not for all buyers, but for most buyers, so more is better. But here, now we're starting to talk about maybe some upgraded countertop offerings or different appliances. It's like now consumers are getting into, so what can I get for my money from you guys? It's that kind of a thought. So you got basic, gotta have it, gotta be there, it's gotta be at least this level. Performance, these are things where more is better, and consumers are gonna use these things to judge one builder for another. So another group of items, and probably the most fun of all to think about, are excitement items. And these are things that consumers expect to pay more for, or maybe not even be able to get at all. And so let me give you a couple examples of what some excitement items might be. We were working out in Phoenix and we were selling some really affordable sort of entry-level houses, TCG 2 and 4. And we were able to get a good deal on the land. And what we chose to do in that community to sort of differentiate it from the competition was to put barrel tile on it, where all the competitors have asphalt shingles. And man, the consumers really liked it. They were excited, and it was cool because it was a look in a community that they weren't expecting to get at that price point. That really worked. When I was working down in Atlanta, we were able to put swim and tennis clubs in communities that were priced better than consumers expect to find those features in the community, and that was another excitement item. In this case, maybe our TCG 6s sort of expected to get swim and tennis clubs. TCG 5s were really surprised by it. So that really worked. That was an excitement item. So what you want to do is group together some items that are really excitement items that consumers wouldn't expect to get. When you've got these three things put together, these three classes of features and options, these three classes of things, the idea is to sit down and look at them and start to plan strategically what you want to go to war with. What you want to do is put together the coolest, the best package for that specific target consumer group that'll differentiate from the consumer. In fact, will blow the competition away. And oh, by the way, just one more thing. Think about signature standards. A lot of the stuff that I've been talking about that would be a performance item or maybe even an excitement item are in those signature standard package, in the NSC packages. But we've got to tell people about it. People aren't going to come in and just automatically know. We need to let them know that this is all part of the package that we've put together for them. It's the value equation we built for that specific consumer. So you got the consumers dialed in, you know what they want, you know what they need. We've been out in the field, we've looked at what the competitors are putting on the ground, what kind of package they're putting together. And now here's another really cool piece of information that we can get to shed light on what kind of a content load we should put in our houses. This is historical information. This is looking at what these same kind of consumers have bought from us and taken from us when we sold to them before. So the idea is to look for communities where we've served similar consumer groups, or even better yet, the same consumer group, and look for a non-NSC community, because you want a community that's offered a bunch of options to people, and they've had to make these selections. So take that, go to the Lawson reports and drop down the option installation reports. Now, when you look at Lawson option installation reports, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to make them behave themselves, because what you're trying to look for is the percent of options that went into the houses that were sold in a particular community. You want to be able to have that view. When you get this report and you get it organized in that way, it can provide some very powerful information. But there are some cautions. There's some things you need to remember. First of all, looking at option installation reports may not cover all of the options that you have to think about. Also, don't just use this report. Some people have made that mistake. We need a broad base of information. That's why we're talking about a 4-step process here to do all of this. Don't over-rely on this report. And then finally, as I kind of alluded to a minute ago, think about all the things that were going on in the marketplace when these options were being selected by people. Step 4 in the process is consumer research. Now, consumer research isn't necessarily something that you'd always do, but it's out there and it's something that you need to know about. Because even within the context of the NSC specs, there's a lot of tough decisions that you need to wrestle with and a lot of choices you need to consider. There are a lot of great methodologies out there for getting good consumer research, but if you're going to do it, there's a couple things you have to remember. Thing one, you need to give yourself some time. Consumer research can't be done overnight. It needs to be set up, and it needs to be set up properly. Secondly, the way that the research is done is really important, and I know your strategic marketing folks will take you through this, but here's the thing. If you took a bunch of consumers in a room like this and just asked them what they want, their answer would be all of it. What you've got to do is set up the research so it forces people to make trade-offs. They've got to put up some budget, they've got to put up some value, they've got to put up some money, or some way to make hardcore trade-offs about things, or the information that you're going to get isn't going to be what you need. The idea with this consumer research is to guide people through a carefully crafted, carefully recruited set of focus groups where they are able to indicate to us what they believe ought to be standard and what they believe the value that they would associate with any upgrade. As we do the research, we're actually going to show people stuff. We're going to show them examples of things so that they really understand what we're talking about. The more that they can see it and feel it and understand what we're talking about, the better job they're going to do about talking about value. But again, we're walking people through, using these examples, walking people through the trade-offs, just like the NSC does. We're trying to, in some ways, kind of mimic what the NSC does. In fact, what this can be really valuable for is establishing or deciding whether you need to go with green or red, or blue or green, establishing the whole NSC level. But man, where this research is really powerful is looking at some of those great big things outside the NSC, like the third car garage, or the covered lanai, some of those kind of things. Should it be in? Should it be out? Is it standard? Is it optional? Where do we put it? That's the way this research can really help you out. Once all this information is gathered and organized, it's time to go back to the conference room, order the pizza, and start making some critical decisions. Decisions on the complete content load of the community and the homes in question. I think you'll find that using the 4 steps we've just reviewed, this process will become more sane. Not easy, but more effective. So here's what you got to do. Just like our little ops team, you got to realize that it really takes a lot to put together all the information that you need to establish a great content load for a community and the houses in that community. But you can do it. The first thing to do is you've got to establish the NSC spec. But once that's done, there's a lot of flexibility inside those spec packages that you still need to make decisions on. Let me give you an example. You can go green with the specs, and you can still offer granite as an alternative standard specification in those homes. A little bit more on the asking price, a little bit more on the selling price, but man, that's something that can really turn the consumers on in some cases. The other thing to remember is there's big bucks in items outside of the NSC specs that you need to think through. What we've tried to do here is provide some methods and some technologies for gathering the appropriate information so we can get out of that I think, you think, she thinks kinds of things, and we can really get down to what the consumers want. So I hope that helps. I hope it works. And remember, the strategic marketing teams out there are eager to help you with all of this stuff, so make sure you get a hold of them. Thank you very much. Good luck.